Alright, so in today's video I wanted to give you a quick tutorial on how to work with Google Forms, just in case you hadn't really used one before creating one for your interview today. One of the things that I noticed is that some of you used a lot of open-ended questions. Now, the disadvantage to open-ended questions is not so much in the way that the user takes them, but in the way that you view the results. So I wanted to show you how a survey looks after it's been taken. So I gave this survey to my Java students after the first week of e-learning just to ask them about how things were going. So you'll notice that here when I was asking them about how much time they spent on their work, I gave them a couple options. Here I gave them some scales of 1 to 5. And then here I gave them an option where they could answer something, in a paragraph format. So notice the red star means that a question is required. Sometimes you'll want your interviewee to have to give you an answer. In that case, you definitely want to make that starred. You would want to have any of your demographic questions about their age and gender and familiarity with the background of what your app is used for. You would definitely want those to be required. So for example, this question I wanted to make required. So if I click on it, I can edit the question. So here's where I can edit the words of the question if you wanted to insert a picture. So some of you had questions about your UI. If you wanted to include a specific screenshot of your app here, you could do that, so that way the question would have a picture right by it. Now, in terms of the options of the question types, so this question here is multiple choice. Multiple choice is similar to a radio button, which you might be familiar with from HTML. This allows you to only have one selection. A checkbox allows you to have multiple selections. You can also have a drop-down, which you can have a lot of choices. So a drop-down would be more preferential if you had a lot of choices, like, for example, what state do you live in? If you wanted to ask them the year of their birth and you wanted to put in all of the years, I don't know. For most forms that I use, I typically use multiple choice or checkboxes. If you wanted to ask them for a short answer or paragraph, those are the two differences. The ability to upload a file, probably not necessarily for what we're doing here. There also is a date and time picker, which you can use as well. Over here we have a slider for whether or not the question is required, and then this option here allows you to duplicate a question. So let's say you like the format that you used for a question, you can use this option to allow you to duplicate it over and over, and then to delete if you don't like it. If you wanted to rearrange questions, you could take them and just literally drag and drop them, and they're kind of like a tile system to rearrange the order in which the questions are shown. Then we have things here where we can adjust the view of it, add images, add a video, add a different section, so you could break it up into parts. So here might be a place where, let's say you wanted to have a small video snippet of a part of your app. You could record just a small snippet and add a video here. So I just figured that I would add some of this information now. I know a lot of you have already made your interviews, but after hearing this, you might think, I think I can make it a little bit better to get more meaningful feedback. Now up here, a lot of times by default our forms, because we're through a school-based Google system, are set up to collect email addresses. If you want that, great. If you don't, you can change that setting. And this setting is right here by default. It requires it to be a 211 person. However, if you're going to be extending this to family members and people in the community that don't go to 211, then you'd want to uncheck this box. Otherwise, they would not be able to participate in your survey. And then you can also choose whether or not they can get a response receipt. This would allow them to see the answers they chose. Sometimes they could care less, allowing them to respond again. In terms of limiting to one response, you don't want someone to spam your survey with lots of answers that might be worthwhile of entering. For me, since I was already collecting email addresses, I did not feel the need to do that. Okay, so now that you've made your survey and you're happy with the content, if you wanted to style it a little bit, up here, these are options for theme and preview. So here, if I were to go up to customize theme, this allows you to pick different colors, upload an image for your header, so you can pick your own image. Like I saw Neon West, they uploaded the actual picture for their game tile, which was pretty sweet, so you can do that. If you do upload your own picture, you want to make sure it has this banner dimensions, otherwise it won't look nice at all. And then you can adjust your font styles, you can adjust all kinds of different things within here. Then we can preview. Preview just shows you what it's going to look like from the user perspective without having to actually send it anywhere. And so that's what our survey is going to look like. And then this other thing here is allowing me to do, typical Google options. All right, so those are all of the features that I've used the most with Google Forms. Now, once you've sent that, and I'll show how to do that in a minute, we want to look at the responses that have come in. Now, there are a lot of ways that you can do this. So first of all, here I see this in summary view. So I can see all the email addresses of my students that took the survey. This right here is what I find to be most valuable. This is why I'm recommending that you want to use radio buttons or checkboxes to allow people to specify an option, because this shows us a pie chart for us. I mean, hello, you can take this and you can copy this chart and paste it right in your summary. And so I can say, hey, 50% of my students said the amount of work I'm giving them was appropriate. And I can say, when I look at this, that 6.3% of my students said that they weren't doing their work. So 95% of my students said that I was giving them an appropriate amount of work between 15 and 40 minutes. So that to me told me, okay, I'm doing a good job so far. Now I can look at this and I can see how helpful my coding bat's been. Again, I can look at this and I can see, okay, a lot of students have found them pretty helpful. Some of them have found them not too helpful at all, but for the most part, they found them average to helpful. In terms of the videos I've been making, this is showing me, wow, okay, the time I'm putting in is worthwhile, because a lot of my students are saying that it is helping them and is beneficial. So this feedback is helping me to better be prepared. So I'll give myself a little pat on the back, and so forth. And then just kind of go through here. And then here, I didn't require my responses to be, they didn't have to give me a response. Not everybody did, but I gave them the opportunity to tell me something that did not fit anywhere else on my survey. Now, let's say you're like, okay, that's great, but I want to know specifically who said what. Well, then you can go to individual. So if I go to individual, I can go person by person who answered my survey, and I can see their specific answers. I can also go question by question. So if I were to look at this here, I can see just this specific question. I can also do this slider bar if I don't want to accept responses anymore. So once you're ready to write your report, if you don't want any more data to go in, you can just slide this over, and then now nobody else can click on the link. So even if they have access to the link would be invalid. And then last but not least is this here. And what this does is it takes all your data and puts it in a Sheets file. So if I click on this, what I'm going to see here is everything in a spreadsheet format. And again, here's the value of using those pre-filled answers. When I say I found the coding bats useful, I can see all of my answers here. I could take this and using Sheets, I could go ahead and I could find an average score here for this. So I can do some calculations on that. So if you're doing numbers from 1 to 5, you could find an average, and you can say, our surveyed, the people that we've surveyed said on average that they gave our UI a scale of 4.2, but they gave our graphics a scale of 2.1. So that tells us that they find the UI easy to use, but they feel that our graphics are kind of boring. So this is where you can use this to really get some good feedback. And then again, all of that content, the form, the information that they put is in here. So those of you who asked your users to type in an answer for their age or type in an answer for their gender, you're not going to have the same answers for everybody. Like if I were to do that, I would ask a question and say, what's your gender? I would have a choice for male, a choice for female, and then a choice for prefer not to say. And so then the only options that would show up here would be male, female, prefer not to say. And then that would also allow me to be able to get this really nice pie chart. If you were to not do that, then your answers would be all over the place. Like imagine here if I just let them type in how many minutes they spent. Well, what's the likelihood that people all type in the same number? It wouldn't be grouping them all 30 to 40 in the same grouping. So the data would be a lot harder to analyze. All right, so now that I've given you guys some feedback on your forms, I would encourage you to talk with your group, make some minor edits, make sure that you feel that they're set up to give you the best, most meaningful input, and then share, share, share. All right, so you might be wondering, well, how the heck do I share my survey? All right, well, let's say I was accepting responses. If I go over here to my survey, what I'm going to do is click on send. And when I click on send, there's a couple ways that I can do this. One is I can email it out. Another thing that I can do is I can copy a link. So I can copy this link. If you're going to do that, I would shorten it to make it a little bit shorter. And I have this checkbox. Again, this is the default because we're part of the 211 Gmail suite or Google Suite. Uncheck this so that way you are not limiting it just to 211 people. And then, you can go ahead and you can post this wherever you feel appropriate. You just want to make sure that you're sharing it to people who will give you valid data and not just spam your form with garbage that's going to clutter it up. Okay? All right, I hope this was helpful, and good luck on your data collection. The next step is going to be taking that data and writing a 2-page analysis of where you're at so far. So you'll basically say, based on this feedback, I can gather that you're going to summarize those results, and then essentially moving forward, how are you going to finish your app with that information in place? And I will put together something in the next 2 days and post on Schoology to give you some guidelines on what information you need to have in there. And then that will be due next Friday. All right, have a great day, guys.